You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021, version 11, the #1 virtual crypto and blockchain conference. Community access is an important part of NFT adoption, and in this section, our experts take a close look at the various communities of NFT projects.
Can you break it down in layman's term for how will NFTs affect people's daily lives?
Okay, so like we got art now, digital art, as it exists. Okay, cool. So people like anyone on the street, you can essentially can make it. They can put it on OpenSea or whatever. Any of these marketplaces out there, and the potential to go from zero to hero, whatever. Like just like from in a couple of days, you know. So someone that may have not have the means to do traditional art or something like that, can just put something out digitally, becomes a meme, who knows what it may become, and they could blow up, and then they gain the benefit from that. One thing right there. And then again, moving beyond digital art, and the bridge between the physical and the digital and the virtual is once a lot of people have idle assets, like things just kind of laying around their house. Like what if you can turn a cup or something, whatever, NFT, and you can put it on the marketplace, or even computer parts. And so if someone want to assemble a computer and edit these computer parts spread around different people in different parts of the world, they could be brought on chain, and then people could purchase these, assemble a computer essentially via parts, idle assets. So it's got something laying around in my house that doesn't generate anything for me, but I can put it on chain, and then maybe I can get it generate income off of that, and then someone else can benefit, they can build their computer or something like that, or whatever they may want to build with their idle assets.
What are some interesting ways that you think that's going to interact with either the people or fans?
Well, I think it's a kind of setting a precedent. They're really trying to figure out, because as we know, the way that China deals with things is different than the West. I think the Chinese government's really trying to actually look out for the people, because a lot of the what has happened with crypto in China is they've banned speculative assets, which is honestly there's a lot of stuff out there. People are losing money left and right. So kind of looking at something that has a tangible value, and I think NFT represents something. Whether it be physical or digital, it actually is something besides just, there's a utility behind it almost, besides just something that may be a meme or a dream. And so I think this is going to be personal opinion. This is NFTs are going to be a way that the rest of the world can interact with China via blockchain. Because it is right now, there's walled gardens. You have China and the West, and of course other walled gardens and other jurisdictions around the world. But NFTs are going to be able to, I believe, move across borders, which is really cool. So people are going to be able to collaborate on an international scale with Conflux NFTs on a public chain, and then people here in the States or whatever are going to be able to interact in the future. It's a bit nebulous right now, but that's going to really make a global decentralized economy instead of just walled garden decentralized economies.
What are some ways you see NFTs being used for governance?
That's a good question. I mean, NFT can really be anything. So it's, again, smart contract contains metadata. It can really lead to again, say someone I don't know, in a DAO, for example. It's you have an artist DAO or something like that, and then you have creators within this DAO. They sell their art, and the art can equal votes or something like that. Where people can have fractional fractional ownership of these NFTs, and so these fractional ownership can come together, and then the people can come together either for a singular vote, or for for a group vote, or for individual votes via NFTs, as a token for their vote, beyond just what we consider traditional voting in DAOs now, conviction voting, on some of these other, I guess, want to say more novel concepts that are they emerging out of governance and DAOs and whatnot right now. That's also why I really want to facilitate with the humanities department is go to the students, go to the people who are going to be using things, and then from the human perspective, can figure out how NFTs or any of these things can go towards how people come to collective decisions together.
How do you think NFTs create more equitable markets?
Yeah, I think the first part is really that access. So long as you have an internet connection, you can basically create an NFT. Now that's kind of a two-sided answer, because there's only about 50% of the world with internet access. So that's kind of maybe the next problem that has to be solved, and that's probably going to expand over time. Another way is really just the community that's surrounding this whole effort. I think the example I was bringing forth in a side conversation earlier was, if you look at NFT NYC, the amount of people that have come to this conference, it's not just your crypto professionals. It's actually probably only like 20-30% of that. Now you have 20-30% of musicians, artists coming in. You also have of all varying degrees of success. Then you have this kind of middle cohort where it's, hey, I'm just interested in this technology. I want to be a part of it, whether it's to participate in purchasing an NFT, or if it's just participating in the discourse, because I think people really need to learn. And that's what's really fascinating about Web3 as a whole, is you have this kind of melting pot. It doesn't matter where you're from. It really is truly global. And I think the main thing, there's a bunch of common points that stretch together, or that bring together all these groups, but I think one thing that stands out is this eagerness to learn. And that's what perhaps makes it pretty equitable in the first place, in addition to the technology accessibility that I was mentioning earlier.
What is the bridge between NFTs being virtual and bridging into the physical world?
Yeah, for sure. I think that why NFTs have taken off so much in the last year is partially due to COVID. People wanting to connect with each other online, people lacking connection because they aren't able to see people in real life. However, having said that, I think as human beings, we're ultimately physical animals. We want to be together. We want to see each other in person. There's nothing like being in an in-person event and hugging your friend who you love versus, talking to someone over Zoom and seeing their little faces pop up. And I think ultimately for NFTs, I think that there are going to be a lot more NFTs with in-person and physical ties. So for example, if you look at Beeple's new work, which is being shown at Christie's right now, Human One, I think it's going to go on sale in mid-November. It's an NFT, right? But it's also an incredible video installation art. And I think that there's going to be more of those online, offline ties within even the artworks themselves as artists begin to explore how to bring digital elements into real life. The other part that I think will cross over is people's need for events, and people want to get to know each other in person. People want to grab coffee, people want to have drinks, and there's such a strong desire to reconnect and rekindle communities after everyone was so isolated last year, that I think that a lot of the future NFT utilities will come from. It will come to, private showings or big events such as what Bored Ape has been doing with the yacht and then the party on Wednesday night. For us, the way we think about it is that ultimately, and we're still in the process of building this out, we want to have, private collector visits, we want to have private AMAs with artists, but we definitely want to be able to offer in-person events for our collectors across the world.
How do you personally envision a lot of the use cases of NFTs right now?
So it's work in progress, so people just discovering these use cases themselves mostly. And first it was a CryptoKitties, blockchain games, and then some other blockchain games. So this kind of adoption for NFTs, the very first. Then it was a crypto art movement, and it was pretty huge. I would say it's still big. And then this 10K collections and PFP trend happened, so now it's the major one use case in the market. Everyone is like selling and buying all these profile pictures, so this is cool. And so this is something that got really huge traction, but meantime it's like tens of other use cases that people discovering, trying, and they not really go like so mainstream as like that I mentioned previously, but still it's the kind of different guys, the creators, they just creating new things. So probably we will see like lots of other stuff. I mean, definitely we'll see lots of other use case in the future. It's cool that NFTs, they're in intersection of like mainstream audience and crypto native audience. Rarible, like traditionally, historically, has a pretty huge number of users who is out of crypto, and the Rarible is their first experience with crypto. So a lot of artists actually. So yeah, I mean, mainstream IP holders, they still trying to figure out the best way to use this NFT standard to actually kind of engage with their audience and sell. So probably it's like in the near future something like DAOs getting pretty good traction. So NFT is used in the DAOs for voting, then games still getting pretty good traction, and then some mainstream use cases I guess we will see in the next like 6 months. And maybe Rarible will bring some of them actually.
But going back to kind of how important community is, how do you think NFTs improve governance specifically?
Yeah, so it's just different model. Previously, it was more about you are voting with your tokens. So you have more tokens, you have more votes. It's like similar look. It works like in the corporations when you have shares mostly. But now for NFTs, it works. It's a different model, like in the government when you have once chairman and he has like one vote, and you're entitled to have this vote technically because you have this NFT. It's just different governance models, and this new, like, it's not really new, but anyway, this governance model when you have one vote for one person is getting pretty good traction now. It seems to be more effective, I guess.
So where we stand right now is that we are just dipping our toes in the water. We had a little bit of an explosion back around CryptoKitties where we really figured out, oh wait, this is possible. And you began to see kind of what you could do with copyrights that could breed with each other and be able to have that generative aspect. And then you started getting into, okay, now we're gonna start seeing art that an algorithm creates. So you start seeing squiggles and you start seeing various different generative artworks. And now we're seeing the fact that these NFTs can signal membership in a community. They can be badges of honor. It's like, there used to be Rolexes, there used to be Ferraris, it used to be Lambos were the big thing that were status symbols. Now it's about owning a Bored Ape. So you can see the NFT universe right now as a community, and these are instances of the community. But that's just the beginning. So as we start getting this technology further and further adopted and in the hands of more and more people, what you're going to be able to see is it can unlock so much frozen value or so much value that is difficult and non-economical to access. And that is what the future of NFTs really are.
So at the moment, you have centralized to decentralized exchanges for crypto, and you have these semi-centralized exchanges for NFTs. And I think what's going to happen is you will see that you will merge those two things. There's no technical difference between selling an NFT or investing in an NFT versus buying or selling a crypto, right? They're very similar. And so I think you will have pools of liquidity and exchanges, either centralized or decentralized, that do both. And I think that will occur sooner rather than later.
And do you think this generative art is a long-term thing?
Yeah, I think there's more and more people generally in the world that have creative jobs than have ever existed before, right?
Yeah.
As we automate all sorts of stuff, and as we take away a lot of the drudgery of what people used to have to do, people can be much more creative and are being much more creative. I mean, think how many knew that content blogging and being someone who was a social media influencer, 20 years ago that didn't exist, right? And we got thousands of social media influencers every second posting on whatever platform you want. Right?
And kind of going to these long-tailed influencers and skill sets and careers.
How do you envision
the future of NFTs, or like what do you like most about some of these use cases?
I like that this idea of smart contracts, which enabled money for the internet, are now showing that there are other use cases in this global march towards decentralization. The global march towards decentralization ultimately means we're not dependent upon governments, we're not dependent upon centralized banks, we're not dependent upon other centralized institutions. We don't need courts and guns to enforce contracts anymore. If I have a smart contract or an NFT, which is what an NFT is, that says I own this JPEG, or I own this Rembrandt, or I own this movie seat, it's provable to everyone in real time, right? And the social aspect of crypto will work out the details, right? That is a big breakthrough.
Do you kind of see NFTs as potentially being like maybe a CryptoPunk or some of these like larger valued assets as like so we talked about Bitcoin being a store of value. Do you see some of these NFTs being like a store of value? Lend and borrow and trade?
Yeah, I see NFTs as being a potential store of value in the collector sense, meaning if I have a digital baseball card or a digital Rembrandt equivalent, and I have some of my most famous, most popular artists that I'm a fan of are now getting into NFTs, yeah, I could see that being a store of value in the future. That's not why I think NFTs are so important, though. They're important because they represent digital bearer ownership in some specific thing for the first time, right? Whether it's ephemeral or long-lived, right? Because the concert ends eventually. But during the life of that concert, I own that seat, and that can be captured in an NFT, okay? That actually goes away at midnight when the concert ends. But if I own the JPEG that hangs on the wall, or the Bored Ape, or the Cypherpunk NFT, I own that forever in theory. But it also depends upon what the contract says in code. Maybe my ownership expires at some point and reverts back to the public. Okay, so it all depends upon what's in the code. But those are individual applications of the NFT idea, which is just getting started. People are going to realize this can represent ownership in anything, and the rights to transfer it can look like anything, and we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
You know, there's an entire spectrum of for the market. You could have a low-cost painting that gives you access to buy certain clothing or merchandise. You could have something as expensive as a $10 million piece of art that also gives you special access to a club or a investment group, right? So there's a broad spectrum and range of just monetary value, but it all follows the same theme. There's a scarce asset with usually an image affiliated, and then special rights affiliated to the people who have that asset.
And do you think that NFTs have to be digitally native? Do you think NFTs, shoes, buildings, physical items? How do you kind of see that hybrid of the digital world and the physical world, and tokenizing something?
It's kind of interesting. I mean, a true NFT sort of has to be digitally native for it to like maintain its Now, what I've seen is actually an NFT starting off digitally native, and then you start seeing physical objects, kind of like how gaming, some of these really popular games, there's actual, plush toys that are built on the games, right? So I can kind of see that happening where it's more just a promotion of the actual core community, whether or not it's tied into an actual, non-fungible token, probably not. But it's definitely, at the end of the day, these are communities, right? That the NFTs are just your access to get into those communities. And communities have fun, startups are always printing startup shirts. Sports teams have, collectibles and jerseys and stuff. So there's a lot of reference points, I think, in the real world that you can look to and see how these communities kind of spin out some physical, products.
So how do you view NFTs in the long run? They're here to stay. It's going to be a lot of different use cases that we don't think of. I mean, people didn't think of Facebook and Airbnb, right, when the internet came out in there, or when it picked up in the 90s. How do you see like the long term of NFT?
Yeah, I think in the long term, NFTs will be here to stay. I think it's going to, just like any market, there's probably going to be some correction at some point in the future. There'll be those headlines saying NFTs failed, everything else, but long term, I think that NFTs are really game changing, and I think that they're going to change a lot of how we view ownership of digital goods, how we license IP, how we store value, and how we trade it, right? So I think, yeah, definitely NFTs are gonna be here for a while.
So we've seen, art, right, all over New York City this week. You've seen pictures in Times Square of digital artists and NFTs coming to life, so to speak. But beyond just art or collectibles, CryptoKitties, things like that, anything that can be proven, the provenance of something can utilize blockchain in a better way, a superior way. So whether it's music royalties, having artists actually go direct to their consumers, whether it is information of any kind, could totally revolutionize real estate and the way we think about real estate and the ownership of real estate and the idea of paper deeds and titles and title insurance. And why do I pay $1,000 every time I buy a piece of property to have somebody prove what we already knew to be true? It can exist in a blockchain forever. So lots and lots of applications across anything that has a property right to it, or intellectual property right, or title. Other applications around, unique or scarce assets across anything. It doesn't have to be art. It could be wine. It could be collectible cars. It could be anything, again, where there's a finite amount of those things, and we want to trade them back and forth over time. One of the fun applications that I like to think about is this idea of, in the old days, if you sold an asset, your claim on the future revenues of that asset was gone. Take a ticket, you sell it to a scalper, and the artist or the venue doesn't get any of that money that the scalper makes. Well, you can actually program in an NFT that the venue gets paid, that the artist gets paid, because they're the ones providing the service. Now, the scalper deserves something for the service of finding a owner that will pay more. But that sharing of those future proceeds, I think, is a great application.
So what we're seeing is, obviously NFTs have really, they've gathered the attention of mainstream media. There's a certain cool social signaling aspect to NFT ownership, and obviously some of the price action reflects that. Going forward, do you see that the value of many of these collectibles stays? I doubt it. I think a lot of this is because it's so new and so exciting, and and especially in this time of the pandemic, as people have become more digitally connected, this is it's just has brought about many macro factors together to create this interest. I do see this going to eventually mature, just like you see a sort of a strong, you will have a sort of a very steep drop off, so you'll have certain digital collectibles that are extremely valuable, just as you will see in the physical goods space. And then you will have maybe the long tail of products that are more accessible and are less scarce, less valuable. And I don't see that being any different in terms of that price distribution of digital goods in, I don't see it very different to how you see that same bifurcation in the price distribution of physical collectibles. So I think it's tough to predict. Like, I'm not an art collector. I don't understand some of the price action of certain collectibles, be it in the physical or digital world. So all I would say is that some of the price action that you see today is a function of really how new this is.
And in your view, what is the big message for people to understand, how will NFTs be significant in their life in the future?
It's really far from now, but NFT can represent any thing, like anything which is unfungible. So it's very useful to handle any kind of rights. So it could be rights for your real estate, let's say, and then it's really far from now. It's, I don't know, tens of years or something. But at this point, yeah, it will be significant, I guess, because you have all your rights entitled to the NFTs. It's like you have a package of this NFTs that represents different certificates and licenses and all this stuff. So yeah, at this point, I guess this will be a major impact. But yeah, now it's far from there.
How do you think NFTs influence the future of identities in Web3?
I think that for me personally, it fundamentally changed how I feel as a collector, where I obviously first started with collecting traditional art because of my family's background as art collectors and art lovers. And to me, whenever I've collected an art piece before, I've had to think about where it would fit in my life. Like what the size of it would be on my bedroom wall. Is it going to be way too big? So I always had to have those contexts in mind. And I also there was a lot of limitations in space too that I had to consider. With NFTs, I feel like I'm collecting in a whole different way. I'm more focused on the emotional aspect and the historical significance of NFTs that I've collected and what they're bringing me. I'm more thinking about supporting artists where, if they put together a physical print, I don't know if I would have the space in my home to showcase their work, but I really love them and want to support them. And NFTs have allowed me to support them in, a pretty crucial way without me needing to give up my very limited real estate in real life. So I think, to me, to answer that personally, that's how I've changed as a collector. But I think for a lot of the friends and a lot of the members in the space where I talk to frequently, what's changed for them the most is how they think about utility and how they think about gamification. Where, for example, for the AI 2041 drop, and this was obviously also to stop bots, which has been so crazy recently for a lot of the NFT drops. We have a pretty complicated whitelist raffle process where you need to basically be involved throughout the week with different activities, from checking the artist's Twitter to being in our AMA to looking for clues hidden in our Discord in order to get the right code that will allow you to be part of the whitelist raffle. And I think this is so interesting because this is not something that's ever been done in any type of real world collectibles before. But now where people are looking for access and people are looking to be involved in a community, they're looking for more games and they're looking for discussions related to solving clues and puzzle hunting together. So I think that entire collection process has also been completely shifted and changed, where before it's you click a button, you buy something, or you pay for something in real life by putting down your credit card. Whereas now, it's you're spending hours on a Discord looking for a code. You're like, I know it's an animal. Where can I find this code? And really enjoying the process of figuring that out and getting to know the community members throughout that, instead of just focusing on the artwork itself.
And can you kind of break down some ideas around, how would you incorporate NFTs with some of the DeFi products? Are they conjoined, or are they just separate, assets themselves?
It starts to exist within the ecosystem. I'd say tech-wise, it's pretty joined, right? So it's not that separate. For example, you can store your NFTs in a wallet, and you could use the same wallet to go and trade on a decentralized exchange. But going a step further, having that NFT in your wallet when you go and trade can give you certain perks. You can get discounts. You can get some sort of privileges, as an example. And so when you start to look at it, it's just inevitable for that to be the next kind of evolution of what NFTs become. You can even have NFTs that evolve. So if, let's say, you're trading on an exchange and you've traded $10 million in volume in a month, your NFT can evolve. It can turn into something else, and then it can unlock certain other privileges. And all that history is being stored around that NFT, which you can then go and sell to someone else. and they'd be willing to pay for that, right? Because you've kind of put all this effort and hit all these milestones, and if someone wanted to purchase that, then you'd have something that you can sell at a premium and pass on ownership to someone else, and then they'd be able to enjoy those privileges. And so it sort of becomes a really like this way of navigating the financial products in the DeFi world, which we'll start to see probably in the coming months to a year. You'll see such use cases.
Speaking to evaluating NFTs, where's most of the value derived from?
That's an excellent question. To answer it, you kind of have to think about where is value derived from in anything. We start, of course, with the US dollar, because that tends to be the reserve currency of the world. Now, historically, I could take a US dollar and go and bring it to a bank or the Federal Reserve and get $1 worth of gold. But that actually just kicks the can down the road a little bit, because why is gold valuable? Now, yeah, there are some industrial applications that you can use gold in that you can't use anything else in, but in general, people have valued gold because it's shiny and rare, which means that, honestly, it has to do with we've all agreed that gold is valuable. We've all agreed that $1 is valuable. We've all agreed that Bitcoin is worth $60,000 or whatever it is today. And that actually just comes from the fact that I am willing to give you $60,000 for a Bitcoin. When it comes to NFTs, it's the exact same mass psychosis, for lack of a better term. I have decided that I'm willing to give 1 ETH or $4,000 for a crypto dad or a Bored Ape. And that's where the value comes from. Now, we can start digging deeper into that, because we start saying, I really like this community. I'm really engaged in this community. And what I want to have is rare, right? So just like having a rare painting like a Van Gogh or a Picasso, I want to have a rare NFT. And that rarity comes from the blockchain. We know how many of these NFTs have been generated, how many are out there, how many have been burned or destroyed. And so when we start on that scale, the things that are more rare or harder to get, that's where more and more value comes from. It's scarcity. It's a simple economic principle of scarcity.
Do you think it has to be digitally native? An in-game asset, or just generated online, as opposed to maybe real estate, a building? Sure. We kind of hear all of an old car.
Yeah, so I think that it obviously works better when it's digitally native, because then there's no debate about some of the things around it, like how do you prove that it's there, et cetera. We do figured as home lending. Okay, a loan is frankly an NFT. It's a non-fungible token, and it describes how much money did I lend you, what was the reason I lent it to you, what's the collateral you put against it, and if it's for a house, is there a deed against it, and so on. And so we found a way of putting all of that on chain. Okay, and so the loan is actually an NFT, and you can trade it as an NFT, you can invest in it as an NFT, et cetera. Somewhere, because some states require it, there is a wet deed signature on the deed. Okay, there's a wet signature on the deed. And the way we fix that is we have a custodian, third-party custodian, that holds that deed, and what they put up is a hash of that deed on the chain, and they say, I'm holding this on behalf of whoever owns the asset, and if at any time they want it, they can produce that hash, and I will give them the deed. And so it does work that way. I still think it's tough to do like a Picasso NFT, right? But it's possible. I think it works better with digitally native stuff, but we are finding ways to do non-digitally native stuff for NFTs.
And we talked earlier about Bitcoin being a store of value or transactional. How do you see some of these collectibles on the art side as being potentially like a store of value? Because some people, I assume, are like, why would you spend? You've seen the numbers, they're pretty high in value. So how do you kind of see them as?
So I do see. Like, for example, you take moments in sport that people have turned into NFTs. I can see some value in that, certainly. Then you have, random 12-year-old does a bunch of pictures of birds using pixels, and people are trading them for several $1,000s each. Are they worth that much? We could argue about that. Are they going to be worth that much 10 years from now? We could argue about that too. So I see some use cases that make a lot of sense to me, and I see some that really don't. And I also, by the way, see, I should have mentioned this before, Bitcoin, there are now projects that allow you to do smart contracts and NFTs on Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is not just now a store of value, but you can actually attach things to it like an NFT. And I think that's super interesting as well.
On the NFT front, collectibles, fractionalization and like buying it outright. How do you kind of see that playing out, I guess, in the NFT community? Fractionalization does allow somebody to get, a piece of it, or buying it whole. And I guess it probably depends on your objective and goals as a owner and what that looks like and how you feel. Like, am I okay with owning a piece of it, or do I need to own it at? But how do you see fractionalization and or buying things outright?
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. Why not be able to pool money and basically participate in collectibles or art or ownership of other things, real estate, and make those partially fungible as opposed to non-fungible, because we can swap ownership maybe, meaning we all have equal stake in something. I don't know, there's different ways to do it. And the brilliant part about this is it's all codable. You can create software that captures all this. Now there'll be regulatory implications, whether we like it or not. Maybe creating fractions of a digital art object might imply securities laws. That'll be tested at some point. But it's brilliant that we can do all these things in this new digital metaverse that we're creating together that weren't even thought of 15 years ago.
Some people want to own the key, and some people, just want exposure to the art or the content. And so those are two different types of people. And I think by creating this fractionalization, you now have two different groups who can engage in this. Some people simply just want exposure to a CryptoPunk without owning a CryptoPunk, right? And potentially the markets for a fractional CryptoPunk are more liquid than owning the CryptoPunk. So I think those are two different users and two different use cases, and it's fine.
And you summed it up, and that's what I was going to say. I think it really just depends on who you are. Do you care about actually owning, buying at the floor? Or are you okay with getting a piece of the pie? It just depends on what your objectives are. Speculative, ownership, sentimental, and that's kind of interesting.
Having both markets is super important, because what you want is very liquid markets on these NFTs, because that enables more financial products to be built. If it's very illiquid, you can't really build financial products on these NFTs.
Yeah.
So the more, whether it's speculative volume there is, or liquidity, you essentially can do more things. And that's very important for an NFT project. And that will enable it to have more yield, more services attached to it, and which will bring greater interest for a lot of these DeFi users and NFT users.
What are some financial use cases that you think could emerge from NFTs?
In financial markets, I think we've seen an evolution. Like if you look decades back to today, right? We've seen an evolution to go from a paper-based construct to a dematerialized one to a digitized one in a piecemeal way. What we are now seeing is the technology to be able to create business logic and trust and transparency in a programmatic way. And so it's really fundamental. Like I'd say it's still very early for financial incumbents to adopt this technology wholeheartedly and figure out, yes, this is exactly where I apply it. I mean, some cases at the surface seem quite obvious in the sense that the financing of real estate. Real estate is ultimately a non-fungible asset. There's no reason why it should be represented by a fungible representation online. If you look at a mortgage today underwritten by Wells Fargo, that's defined by 100 attributes to describe a particular property. There's absolutely no need for that many attributes to be able to prove that this is a unique asset. That being said, there are many things, many barriers to adoption of NFTs. There are many issues that need to be solved, and overall, the biggest of all is innovator's dilemma. So if you have companies that are used to working in a particular way, I find it very difficult for them to radically change the infrastructure that they are building off of and running off of.
I spoke about this in a panel actually on NFT NYC, and one of the things that is the obvious next step, there's a bunch of different next steps that this industry can take, and I think like with crypto, like with DeFi, there are going to be many different projects that take those respective paths. But one of the paths could be, well, marry the DeFi side and also the NFT side. One example is, hey, these NFTs now have value to people. So let's say you have a collectible for a celebrity, for example. Who's to say that that can't be used as financial collateral to take out a loan, for instance? So right now, if you take out a mortgage, you basically either have to put up cash or you put up your furniture or some sort of physical asset, and the bank basically has rights to take that away from you if you default on your payments and whatnot. And that's kind of those are the safeguards that are in place. With NFTs, who's to say that your cherished collectibles on one side can't be used as collateral to maybe facilitate a loan payment in the mortgage space, or even something as small as a car payment?
For you personally, what are the important metrics for NFTs that you think are important for people to know?
Right now, if you're talking about digital collectibles, I think it's really being hypercritical with the evaluation of the whole project. It's very similar to investing, or angel investing, I think is a good example I tend to give too. You don't simply just look at like the logo and decide, all right, well, I'm going to buy this company, right? I feel like sometimes, especially with a lot of energy and excitement surrounding a sector, an investable sector, you all of a sudden have a lot of people that are just going with their emotions and not necessarily taking the proper due diligence checks that they might be taking on any other day-to-day decision. So to kind of dig a little deeper, it's like, well, what's the team like? If it's anonymous, because we have an anonymity in the space now, can you figure out points of proof where you're not at risk, where these anonymous people are malicious? Not all anonymous people are malicious, and I don't think that's even close to being true. But it's really just a matter of understanding, all right, well, so long as I know that they're trustworthy, maybe I can move on to the next checkbox. The next checkbox is, how are these NFTs structured? If you have hundreds of thousands of NFTs, it's not as scarce anymore. So perhaps it might be too much of a supply, especially with the community that might not be as sizable to take on that demand. Other things would be, for me at least, as with the creative background, it's like how high quality is the artwork. I think that's also, especially in the art world, is more or less true. But again, another kind of I guess opposite example to that is you have very simple implementations like CryptoPunks, pixelated art. That's not necessarily high quality in the sense of like something highly detailed and very meticulous, but again, it's also simple and elegant. So you kind of have to push and pull those levers. And if you feel like you can minimize your risk to a certain degree, maybe arbitrarily speaking, 70–80% of your confidence is in the project, then I think that's when you can say, okay, well, I can confidently move forward, and still don't necessarily rely on the fact that it's going to be a guaranteed moneymaker effectively, but at least you can stay comfortable in saying, all right, well, at least I've done the checks that need to be done, and I'm happy with the purchase decision here.